Welcome into the latest episode of the RinkWise Podcast. I am your host, Evan Marinofsky, joined, as always, by the great Patrick Donnelly. Pat, what's up?
The season is the season's here. You're just about here, which is exciting. We talked about in the last pod, doing our preseason magazine, which is stacked with stuff as always, and kind of like last year and this year, it just gets you excited for the season.
It does. And for you, it's even more fun because last year you started with us in like October, and then it was
Yeah,
like, all right, you got to hit the ground and run 100
yeah,
miles
we
an
were we were
hour.
behind the eight ball when I started last year. It was just frantic, but now
But
now
you
we now
you
we got it this year.
you were able to do it. I mean, your rankings last year of girls prep teams at the beginning of the year was not that far off from where it ended, right?
Yeah, there are a couple that, um, I had Dexter in there. They started slow, but then they made it to the small school or large school championship. So we were pretty on it.
Yeah, and now it's like you got it down. You know everything now. It's crazy how that works. Just
Yes, not a single thing I will get wrong.
exactly. No, predictions correct, everything correct. But so yes, this is the girls prep preview episode. We did boys prep last week, or as the last podcast. And this is the girls. Now we're recording this November 15th, so this is before the Mass State tournament for fall hockey. I believe New England is around the same time as well. That has yet to happen, so we can't really go into any of that stuff. But it's an exciting time because obviously, with the girls starting up, I mean, this is the best to me. This is the best time of year for hockey by far.
Yeah, sort of everything we've talked about. Everything's new, exciting. Every team's going to be nasty. Every player's going to have a breakout year. It's so exciting. And most times that'll probably be the case. And it's just especially like we'll get into this, but just with how deep it seems that the region is this year, it should be an awesome season.
Yeah, this is shaping up to be a fun year. And we'll start with everyone's favorite, which is the Elite Eight favorites. Every team thinks they have a chance at the Elite Eight. Can we get in this year? Like, what's that gonna take? Um, you can speak to this a lot better than I can, but I read a lot of. Obviously, I read every one of your stories. Can you believe it? Can you believe we actually edit these stories before we put them out? I
We
mean,
just throw them up there.
isn't that crazy? Um, but so I've read all your girls prep previews and obviously your fall hockey coverage and everything. And there's one team to me that I've read that you've written about that stands above the rest in the Elite Eight field. Who is that
Yeah.
team? I think we're thinking the same
So
thing.
when I was putting my top 10 together and sort of just thinking about the year, I'm like, oh, Nobles, Wilson. I was like, "Ugh," but they lost some key players. Who's that team this year? And like eventually like Phillips Andover. Like it's right in front of me. Like look at what they have coming back. Look at all the college commitments they have, all the firepower, the star in net, the stars on D, stars at forward, great coach in Martha Fenton. It's like I hate like anointing a team and putting the pressure on a team. I have them too. I gave Nobles the nod. Nobles is still very going to be a factor.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, spoiler. But man, they're my preseason favorite, Andover. You go up and down the lineup. You bring back your entire top six. Peyton Kennedy, last year's leading school scorer. She's a D3 commit. The rest of the way, you have kids who are committed to Division I colleges. Sarah Powers just committed to BC. She was her top goal scorer last year. Emily Mars committed to BC for soccer. Like, unbelievable hockey
That's
player.
an
It's not even her
athlete.
top sport. Um, We'll kind of get into that in net for Andover in a second. Caroline Averill, obviously one of the more highly regarded prospects in the region. She just committed to Princeton. You got Lily McInerney, who came off an ACL tear last year, had a pretty good season, 14 points after getting her legs under her. She just committed to Northeastern. You got Kira Bruin, who had 14 points as well. She just committed to Cornell. Huge frame. I believe she's 5'10", 5'11", might be pushing 6 feet. Really
As
heavy
someone
shot.
who is 5'10", it's so nice to hear you say 5'10" is like very tall. I love that.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, I mean, you just look up and down the forward group, and they added pieces. They brought Molly Driscoll, who was the captain and leading scorer of Belmont Watertown last year. Maddie Greenwood, who is obviously one of the best MIA players as well. She was key to back-to-back championships at Duxbury in D2. Um, like you and I talked about this. They're that loaded among the returners, and they added pieces, and it's the same on D. You got Molly Boyle committed to Yale. I've said might be one of the best do-it-all defenders in girls prep. Very offensively minded, but big frame, great skater, good stick, very good in her own end. Maggie Averill, a top 09 in the country. She's going to be a very popular recruit next off season. Had 18 points as a freshman. Her sister Caroline and Molly Boyle each had 18 points for Andover, and that was all with each of them missing a handful of games
That's
for the
crazy.
U18 Women's Worlds. So you got the two studs on D. You got a couple young players that really saw important minutes in the top four for Andover. You got Kimmy Duplessis, Sienna Glass, Sarah Lackley's another returner who should see more minutes. And then we talked about the additions. Someone we talked a lot about last year in the MIA is Vanessa Hall, who is coming in as a freshman. She was fantastic at St. Mary's as a seventh and eighth grader. Really high point production, played every second of the D1 state championship that went to triple overtime. Um,
That was crazy.
that was the craziest part of the entire day. And it might not get talked about enough about, St. Mary's comeback, triple overtime. She played every second of the entire game.
I like
Um,
she played a full game, correct?
yeah. And three periods of overtime.
Oh, I forgot. I completely forgot about because that was the early game. That was one of the earlier games, and that set the whole
Yes.
day back like many hours.
Yes. It was the first, might have been the first game of the day. It
It
set,
was. It
set
was because I remember
everything back.
you did the first half and I did the second, and I
Yeah,
was
you
like, "Oh, how
walked
are things
in.
looking?"
Yeah, you walked in ready for your game, and it was like we're nowhere close. But
A
yeah,
full game though is incredible.
yeah.
It's
So
insane.
so I mean, assuming like grows a little bit just with her skating and her skill set, she has the potential to be a stud on defense. They added Maya Koo, who's played boys hockey in Canada. She's been with the Valley Junior Warriors this fall. And then in net, Avery Roadheffer. Um, I think from start of the season to the end of last season, I saw Andover 3 or 4 times last year. Um, every game I saw, she got better. And that's a sentiment Martha Fenton agreed with. Just seemed to get way better as the year went on. Took a lot of the pressure off herself. And another one of these kids that's just a freak athlete. Rode for the first time at Andover last spring and parlayed it into a D1 commitment to Michigan for rowing.
That is quite the move.
And rowing's intense. It's one of those like if yeah, it's crazy.
You gotta be. That's one of those sports. Like, not to get too off track here, but like that's one of those sports I don't think I'd have any interest in because it's just like you're sitting there, your
It's
arms have
cold,
to
it's
be
pitch black,
yeah, insane.
it's
Like you're just
core, it's arms. Yeah.
oh, your arms gotta be. I mean, you get like jacked. I mean, you want to
Yeah.
get like but it's a fascinating sport, and you're right. It's cold out, dark out. You're never doing rowing at like 1 in the afternoon in like the summer. It's like 6 a.m. in like January that you're freaking out there. Um, I look at Andover, like I agree with you. I think what Andover has is superior, at least from the things I've read from what you've written about. I mean, just what a group of not just like older returners, but like high end young players, and they added kids, which like that's
Yeah.
the other part. And they've been knocking on the door for a while. Like this has
Yeah.
not been just last year. It's been for quite a while.
Yeah, they fell to Williston in the championship 2 seasons ago now, and like you look at it, and they didn't have anyone who was headlining the league in scoring. They didn't have a 40 or 50 point score, but they had a lot of balance and the depth that they have of just high end talent throughout the lineup. And that's something they've sort of talked about is how like this group of 25s and 26s, especially the seniors that are graduating, like just how kind of special it is to play with this group of players at the same time. It's something, and I think they're going to have a really exciting year.
I agree. I think that they are set up for quite the season. They're not the only Elite Eight favorite, though.
No,
Obviously, you have some other heavy hitters. Nobles, reigning champ. Williston won 2 years ago. Where do you see sort of the field? I don't want to say after Andover because you have Nobles above them, but sort of around Andover.
yeah. Last year was like, the top three, maybe four every now and then was like it was a clear tier. And that might be the case this year, but I think like going into the year, I think there's four, maybe five teams you can definitively look at and say they have as good a chance as anyone As much as we just pumped Andover's tires, Nobles is still really good. They only lost one top six forward, only like one meaningful contributor from their forward group, considering what they lost on D. They bring back their top center, Callie Brown. They bring back Greta Hulbig, who just committed to Yale. Molly McCurtain's a Northeastern commit. You have this entire group of eighth and ninth graders, especially like Catherine McCool, who was a stud last. She had like 22 points as an eighth grader, scored in the championship. That's the most probably exciting thing about Nobles is that next wave that you can clearly see coming up front. And everybody's another year faster, bigger, stronger. So up front, they're going to be just fine. On D, that's the question marks. They lost three D1 commits, another and then a D3 commit. Four really standout players. But they have some key returners, and then the most interesting piece probably for Noble's defense is what they added. We're just jumping ahead a little bit here for some new faces and new places, but Ava DeCourcy is a really high level productive defender who was at Tilton the last 2 years. She's reclassifying to 27, and she's going to be at Nobles this year. They bring in a couple MIAA standouts and Reese Engel, who played at NDA, and Nora Shea, who played at Braintree. And then in net, they lose Anya Zbkowska, but Annie Spring and Anika Jonas have both showed well in limited samples. Jonas plays on that freaking stacked U19 Wizards team.
That team
Um,
is unreal.
yeah. So again, like two strong options, albeit maybe slightly unproven. Spring's another one of those freak athletes. She's committed to I want to say Middlebury for not hockey, but like totally. Tom Reeser thinks she could have had her pick of sport probably for D3. So yeah, there's them. There's Williston. Williston lost Monique Lyons and Caroline Offiero, but bring back Olivia Farabee in net. That's huge. River Grady behind her is another strong prospect who could see more time this year. And then even though you do lose the leading scorer in the league and an immense talent, Monique Lyons, you still have a crazy group coming back. There's Violet Carroll, who had a great year, flipping back and forth between 4 and D last year. I think Nora Curtis might be one of the best 200-foot centers in prep. Really big frame. She's a monster in the slot on the power play. She's committed to Cornell. You have Mia Daly, who impressed as a freshman last year, and just a slew of others. So Williston, still a factor. They were a period or really close to a three-peat last year in a really tight game with Nobles. And then Loomis Chaffee is, someone else I would highlight with, Megan Hosman, Carly Dan, Katie Collins on D. Collins committed to Princeton, Dan, Cornell, and Hosman, Penn State. They lose the starting goalie in Layla Fournier, but, and again, plenty of opportunity in net. They have Emily Hosman, Megan's little sister, as well as Adeline Roper, who showed well last year. And then I think probably the forward group I might have underrated the most as I was doing this, a lot of kids had breakout seasons last year, so it's like kind of continuing that step. But you have a Yale commit in Annie Schwartz, Harvard commit in Lindsay Stepnowski, who's had a phenomenal summer and fall. And then Ellie LaChance had a great season last year. Chloe Obser's back as well. So again, just a deep team.
That's the thing, and I think that's the biggest thing when it comes to these teams at the top is vets, new players, and depth. Like if you have that depth at forward and D, you can usually project that team pretty far. One area that's always fun to talk about is sort of that, not just teams that are outside the Elite Eight last year that could make it in, teams that are going to be in the Elite Eight mix around those top four teams that you mentioned. Who do you have your eye on as those groups?
Yeah, so I said 4 or 5 teams. We've already mentioned 4, so that fifth team is New Hampton, back-to-back small school titles. The best team, not in the Elite Eight last season, maybe even the last 2 seasons. One of those teams, you come back and it's like, you could make just as good a case as anybody that they could win it all. True Thompson has a case to be maybe the best defender in prep this year. She had 27 assists and 35 points in 30 games last year.
That's wild.
As 27 assists.
It means
And
it's like it's an assist a game. I'm almost
yeah,
like that's incredible.
yeah. And that was her first season in prep. So again, another year of understanding just the landscape and like another player on that Wizards team, where like their power play is Globetrotter. She's the one running it. You know, it's a lofty comparison, but when I see her and the way she skates and patrols the offensive blue line, I think a lot about Cale Makar,
I
which
love
is
that.
I know you'd like that, and it's again a lofty comparison, but she's backing it up, and then a whole bunch of others. So True is committed to oh, I'm blanking on it, UConn. And then you got Julia Laughlin, a UNH commit. She led the forwards with 31 goals. Kennedy Walker's a Yale commit. You got a couple D3 commits in Caroline Thomas and Trinity Walsh. Walsh is both Thomas and Walsh have I believe Thomas committed D3. But they've had great falls with the Junior Eagles as Walsh was coming off a torn ACL last year. Craig Churchill's really excited for a full year of her. Kaylee Michaud Nolan, good center for them. Emma McPherson, someone who's on their third line, and Churchill's pretty confident she'd be a top six, maybe even first line player on another team. And you look at D, whether it's you got True Thompson, Reese Luber is going to miss the start of the year with injury, but he's going to play a key role. You got Drew Hayhurst, someone who took a step last year, and probably with more confidence this year may even play a bigger role. And a big addition in Addie Peel from Brooks, who has the size, has the skating, has the reach, has the shot. Um, Really good, just 200-foot defender. And on that Valley Junior Warriors team, she had a really impressive New England district camp. Good fall. So there's that. The question is in net. They lost Vera Lee. But again, they have a newcomer they're excited about. She's on that Warriors team. And let me find uh, who the returner is. Kara Cusack, who again another one of those players who, in a small sample, the last few years has done well, and it's kind of this has been potentially her opportunity in waiting to have the net.
I think it's interesting. I had a coach ask me last year, from a team that was in the boys' small school tournament and made a good run. He was like, "What do you think is better, winning a smaller large school title or just making the Elite Eight?" And
Winning a
New
title.
Hampton's in it. What was that?
I say winning a title.
I, yeah, I don't know. I think making the Elite Eight. Now as someone whose Framingham high school teams always made the Division 1 tournament and went deep because there were not the CMs and the Zavarian, or not actually we beat Zavarian, but like the CMs and the St. John's Preps of the world. It made it easier. So I guess I should err on your side. I do think it's bigger to make the Elite Eight, and it's funny because they've won 2 straight small school titles. New Hampton girls has, and I do think, and you're right, and I've heard you talk about it. You obviously just did here now. Um, I think making the Elite Eight is that next step, and by
Yes.
that being the next step, I think that makes it a little bit bigger. I'm not demeaning championships, by the way. Like winning a title is a huge deal, and that's a huge thing. But I like that's a team that is like New Hampton girls is like right there. I mean, they are
Yes.
like a fingertip away from being an Elite Eight team, and I agree with you. I think this is probably the year
Yeah. I
that they
mean,
slither on in.
yeah. Like just kind of debriefing from last season, and it's like I said, I think clearly the best team that wasn't in the Elite Eight, and I kind of slept on them throughout the season just because I didn't see them as much. But they were legit. Some others, Dexter coming off a large school runner-up, BB&N coming off large school championship, Groton second straight small school runner-up. Again, some really high-end talent on all of those teams. Dexter is Evelyn Doyle, who led the way as a sophomore last season, really good 200-foot center. Alex Mitsakis and Maddie Funk, got a pair of BC commits on defense, and Maddie Murphy and Elena Dunn. And again, another team that added, they bring in Maggie Trzynski. It's going to be your first year at Dexter. You may be familiar with the last name. Um, Really skilled blue liner. And you also bring in Devin Moore, who was a stud and took over games for Notre Dame Hingham last year. Again, a powerful and really skilled center. So Dexter's one to watch. Kind of speaking of like kind of power forwards, BB&N's bringing Hannah Weihauser back. I believe I'm saying her name right. She's a Yale commit, missed pretty much all of last season with a broken collarbone, came back. She was point per game down the stretch. And someone who plays on that top line with that Wizards team we keep talking about. And for a team as big and as loaded as they are, for her in the 3 times I think I've seen them this fall to consistently be a play driver on every shift on a team that good. is very impressive to separate herself like that. And she's got the Yale commit. She's an impressive player already. Groton's interesting. They lose top defender Kira Lai, starting stud goalie Veronica Hadamovsky, but what they bring back up front, they're running back their first line, Maddie Cronin. She's a Colgate commit. She's a senior. Um, Most of her assists last year went to Tina Scalise, someone we've been very high on, who's just committed to Princeton. Kind
Who
of
doesn't know
someone,
that name, by the way? Like Tina Scalise, I feel like we put her on
yeah.
billboards basically.
I mean, something Tim Leroy
And
and
it's
I
worth
kind of
it.
talked about was like the last few years, even though they've made the small school championship, Groton's kind of been like, up and coming and turning heads. And like last year was kind of like the year where it feels like, at least in his evaluation, like Groton and Scalise also arrived. And it's like, all right, when we come into the rink this year, we're not going to be catching anybody by surprise anymore. So there's that. Again, the key is in net. Um, Nora Wilson will have a chance to step in as a starter. They bring in Maggie Weldon. And then on D, another exciting addition is Tatum Friedholm, who had an awesome season at Lincoln Sudbury as a freshman last year. Sort of like Peel, she's got that size, she's got the skating, she can quarterback a power play. And just to produce like she did as a freshman D, playing top minutes in the MIAA was really impressive last year. Then the only other teams I'd highlight in these sleepers outside the Elite Eight is Cushing, maybe one of those teams that um, you say best team not in the playoffs last year. They were sort of playing their best hockey at the right time. Decimal points didn't go in their favor. Um,
Yeah, they just missed,
by
right?
0.00008, something like that. Yeah.
Oh
Um,
God.
so, I mean, the thing for them is, again, we're kind of just skipping ahead to some additions here, but Bella Freitas, who we talked about all the freaking time last year when it came to high school, she had like 65 points, 40 goals at St. Mary's.
Nasty.
She was a
Oof.
stud. And, a lot of that was because she could just do whatever she wanted at will, and nobody could stop her. So it'll be interesting to see how she jumps into Cushing. But she's also not going to be someone that they're asking to carry the offense because they have plenty of returners. You got Brooke Harb, and then you look on D, Lily Tewksbury, Julia Lambert's another forward they got coming back. Just a whole bunch who have really had, I think, good positive steps this fall. Molly Bardall's another one. And then in net, I think, is the key for them. They lose Lily Prendergast. She's at Vermont now. But Sadie Bellissimo is someone that Valerie Bono has been really excited for coming along here. And sort of this is what they mapped out. This is the year that she's going to be the starter, and seems like she's also on that Wizards team. If you're sensing a theme here for the players I'm highlighting,
Man, it's crazy how that works.
yeah. So she's someone who has a chance to kind of fly in under the radar this season, kind of like the rest of the Cushing team, and really turn heads. And then the other team who beat them for that last playoff spot in the small tournament was Rivers. Super young team last year. Keith McLean, really aggressive style. They bring back Lindsay Morin. She's I think Georgetown field hockey commit. Their leading scorer. Again, a whole bunch of young players. On D, you got Catherine Putkus. And in net, Serafina Applegate was really one of the top goalies, I think, in that small school field last year, maybe even in prep. Saw a pretty heavy workload and did well. So they're another team to watch.
I think it's interesting, kind of just how many teams are sort of going to be vying for those Elite Eight spots, which sometimes you don't see that every year. And I think it's also interesting, like you mentioned, a team like Cushing getting really hot at the end last year. Those Elite Eight teams that are like 5, 6, 7, 8 aren't necessarily the 5, 6, 7, 8 teams in January or even early February. Like it's typically that happens late. And same thing with like the small and large school seeds. Like those 1, 2, and 3 seeds are sort of in the running for the Elite Eight the whole year. But then the rest is all that comes together like last weekend of the year typically. And I think kind of how you're explaining it with girls, I think that's kind of exactly how it's going to go this year.
Yeah, and that's something you saw a lot in the large and small school field. Like BBN and Dexter started the season well below 500, and they went on a crazy run, caught fire at the right time, and both had a chance to win it all. BBN did, and even when you look at the Elite Eight field, like Nobles was the team to beat. They were undefeated. They pretty much ran the table. And Williston's Williston. They got the reputation. Loomis Chaffee was a team that I kind of had up and down in the rankings at the start and the middle of the year. And they went on this run. It was, I think, 20 games unbeaten from, winning the Patsy Auden tournament over Andover. And then they went on this crazy run to their next loss was against Andover in February. And that coincided with, Hosman and Collins on the top pair not allowing a goal at 5-on-5 for like 20 straight games. It was a 2 month stretch.
That's
Decent.
wild.
It's decent.
That's insane.
Yeah. That was a really cool nugget that Liz Layden had. But yeah, I mean, it's sort of like Loomis got hot at the right time, and boom, there they were as a top 5 seed in the Elite Eight. So yeah, it's kind of like what we talked about. It's getting better as the season goes on, playing your best hockey at the end is kind of what matters. If you're not clearly from the onset the best team.
I always tell people, like, in prep and high school hockey, you see, like, how you'll hear of crazy things that happen in a sport, like that's where it happens. Like if you go to a high school game, there's like a very good chance, like um Vanessa Hall playing a full game, like
Yeah.
that's crazy. You don't see that
Yep.
at the pro level or even college, but at high school and prep, like you're going to see that from
Yep.
time, a thing like that, or the stat you just mentioned. It's just bonkers. Some
Yeah.
of the things
Unless
that
you're
you
Seth
see.
Jones in the bubble against Toronto.
That's
Then
right.
you'll play 60 minutes.
Yes, then you'll
Um,
play a legitimately full game.
yeah, and also like it's the start of the season can be choppy because you're not into the league schedule, and this is kind of going back to a previous tangent. You're not into your league schedule yet. You get the holiday tournaments, then you got a break, and then you come back from break, and that's when you sort of hit the ground running. And that's what we
Yep.
saw with those teams that had those fantastic stretches down the final 2 months of the season.
And there's the opposite, where
Yeah.
teams run the table on the league opponents in the beginning of the year. They run the table in the holiday tournament. They come back and they're completely different teams. So
Yep.
I'm curious to see how that kind of plays out in the girls. One theme that we've consistently mentioned with a lot of these teams is a lot of new faces coming in, a lot of really good players coming from the MIAA, coming from other prep teams to higher end or better prep teams. We've mentioned some of them, but who are some of the ones that maybe we haven't mentioned yet?
Yeah.
Or we can dive deep on
I
the ones
think
that we have we
I think
have
we actually
mentioned.
covered the new faces that I had listed. I think there are just some other teams that I would highlight. Of a handful of teams that made the Elite Eight that I haven't even mentioned yet. From last year, Deerfield, um, Campbell Croty has a case to make for maybe being the best goalie coming into the year in prep. And she was thrown into an impossible spot last year. Their starter got hurt, and she was the only goalie in the roster.
That's
One
wild.
for the entire season. One.
That is
Um,
insane. You're like, you got to play every game.
and
Like
you got to
there's
stay
no,
healthy.
yeah, get
Um,
ready to learn that crease, buddy.
yeah. So she was fantastic. She had a 930 or 940, something in that range, and committed to Holy Cross this summer. So they have her. They lose Annie Dingus, but Olivia Austin, Kira Austin, both very strong prospects. Ali Corriere is a good puck mover on D. Sophie Frost, David Giroux up front. Kent has the Bishop twins, Rachel and Renee, both committed to Cornell. They lose their stud goalie last year, Lauren Ferrari, but again, a solid group of returners. Elena Gualtieri's in there as the new head coach. She's kind of a lifer at Kent. St. Paul's, we haven't mentioned them. Kelly Mackey's really had them dialed the last few years. Tess Mulcairn's a really strong prospect, I think. Maud Neiman's committed to BC. Um, Against some strong young players coming in. Some again good defenders on the back end as well. Tabor's in there. Thayer. How can you not mention Thayer with Morgan McGathy?
Yep.
I think Phillips Exeter is another one of those teams that um, was right there at the end for the playoff picture. And started the season really well, kind of tapered off, kind of came back. So be interesting to see what they do with another deep group of returners. They didn't lose a whole lot. And then Westminster, they lost Talia Andi, I believe, but you bring back Bella Zapata, question mark in goal, but again, another team that's in there. Choate too. Choate didn't lose a whole lot, and they were, I think, the 1 seed in the large school tournament, and kind of got upset there by BB&N in overtime. But Choate has a very big group returning as well.
It's one of the things you just mentioned there quite a bit is the college commits. And one thing that I love that since you've come on is we've really expanded into covering girls' college commitments because there are a lot. We have databases. We do regular sort of takeaways and big news if someone big commits, especially during the summer. Who are some of the recent ones of late that have stood out to you?
Yeah, we mentioned Caroline Averill and Tina Scalise. I think those are two huge gets for Princeton, down the middle. And you look at another Ivy Cornell gets Kira Bruin, who, um, really big threat on the power play when I've seen her. She has a cannon of a shot, and then like just her size. If she kind of comes into the frame a little more, you can really see the potential there. Lily McInerney's not someone who's going to stand out with her size. I think she's only 5'3", but just a great contributor for that Andover team and in the junior warriors I've seen this fall. She's in the times I've seen her this fall, been one of the best players on the ice and can kind of take over shifts and someone who does the little things well. Again, not flashy, but just gets it done. Lindsay Stepnowski is someone I'm really excited about. I mentioned the strong summer and fall she's had. Um, Really strong center. I think an excellent play driver. Someone we haven't mentioned is Maddie Laha at St. George's. She's committed to Holy Cross. Um, from what I saw this summer, she seemed to get a couple steps faster with from start of the summer to the end of the summer, between like Wizard Showcase and Naha Labor Day. And someone I think is, in addition to building that speed, just a good, powerful kind of two-way center, who can drive play in the middle of the ice and get her licks in around the net. Julia Lambert's another kind of power forward type. Cushing, we've mentioned her. Valerie Bono is, really excited kind of where she's at, like, skating wise and hockey shape wise coming into the year could be, even as productive as she was last year. I think she had 17 points, which she's, I think, second leading scorer returning for Cushing. Um, you know, should be someone who takes a step. Mentioned the Bishop twins, Renee and Rachel, both committed to Cornell. Renee is, I didn't see Kent a whole lot. The one time I went to see Kent at Nobles, it got snowed out. Um,
I remember that.
yeah, and I showed up to Nobles because the snow hadn't hit us yet, but it was in Connecticut where Kent is, so they canceled. But I got to Nobles, no game. Um,
Fun.
but Renee, from what I've seen in the fall with Mid Fairfield, really cerebral playmaker and a good center who the play just kind of facilitates through her. And then Maud Neiman, we mentioned at St. Paul's Boston College commit. This was back in the summer, but just kind of forgot to highlight it in previous. But again, another one of those players that she's not going to maybe blow you away with highlight reel plays, but good speed. She's a good skater. She's effective kind of throughout the offensive zone. And again, someone who can, carry the puck well in transition and kind of drive play that way.
That's what gets you college commits, kids. It's not always the dangles because the dangles aren't going to be there in college. It's playing a good 200-foot game, and
Transferable skills.
that's what it is. It's transferable,
For diehard listeners, they
projectable
may know that.
skills. Yes, exactly. You're 100% right. Um, on the boys' side, we did predictions at the end, and I am going to ask you, Pat, to make a prediction. Who is in the Elite Eight championship and who wins at the end of the year?
I'm gonna go with a repeat of last year's Patsy Auden
Ottoman.
holiday
Ottoman.
holiday tournament final, with between Phillips Andover and Loomis Chaffee.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, Phillips Andover's got the depth on everywhere you look. Same thing with Loomis, especially if Adeline Roper or Emily Hosman really takes hold of the net. And you talk about the D, how important defense is. And I mean, when you have a top pair that doesn't allow a goal 5-on-5 for 2 months, that's pretty good. Um, and that's not even to mention like, Carly Dan's on their second pair. She'd be a top pair defender on any other prep team. Hattie Willard's another one who, has flown under the radar and plays a key role. Um, I think both teams are just kind of the total package. And Williston, as much as they lost Monique Lyons, strong group of returners, Nobles losing those four defenders, um, they reloaded. So it's wide open. And that's not even counting the other teams we got into outside the Elite Eight or lower down in the Elite Eight. We've talked about it's a deep year. It feels pretty wide open. Obviously there are some early favorites. There always are, but maybe I was a little naive last year, just getting my feet wet with, all right, these are the teams. And now this year, now that I know the landscape better, feels way more deep. But I think it'll be the case. I think there are going to be some teams who are a lot better than last year. But I'm going to go Phillips, Andover, and Loomis Chaffee.
Who wins?
I mean, I can't spend like 7 minutes at the top of the show pumping up Andover and then not pick them. So I'm going to take Andover.
Yeah,
I think the thing is Avery Roadheffer. She's got that crease locked in. Loomis, whether Roper and Hosman are in a bit of tandem, one of them takes hold. I think that stability and how good Roadheffer has turned into throughout her career I think, gives them the edge.
I don't love my matchup because it's teams that we mentioned as favorites. I always like I'd love to put a New Hampton in, but I'm gonna go with Andover and Williston. I think
Okay.
it's those two. I think
Rematch of 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think Andover gets revenge and Andover wins. Andover's been chomping at the bit for a couple of years here. I think they get over the hump finally this year with this roster's too good. I think it's Andover and Williston, and Andover wins it in the Elite Eight. So yeah, it should be exciting. I'm excited for this year. Because I think the girls' landscape is especially fascinating, given the depth, given these high-end college prospects. Either they've already committed or they haven't. So it should be an interesting year.
And we talked a lot about that Wizards team that's freaking stacked. That's not even mentioning, Assabet has, both Averils, Molly Boyle, Maud Neiman, plenty of firepower in Assabet. And, you look at the Mass Spitfires, Mid Fairfield, all teams and players to keep an eye on as, the fall season wraps up and we get into prep.
Yeah. And again, we're going to have a lot for girls coming in the next couple weeks, next couple months. A lot of preview stuff coming, the magazine, a couple features in there on some of these teams. And I think there's a lot coming that you guys can devour, as you always seem to. We thank you for your support.
For over 20 years, Eric Nate's Euro Hockey has been helping hockey players of all ages develop their individual skills and improve on all aspects of their game. Through structured drills and innovative training equipment, Eric Nate's Euro Hockey's intense on-ice instruction challenges each student to be the best at their ability. Find a hockey clinic or summer camp that is right for you today at nateshockey.com. That's NATES hockey.com. Eric Nate's Euro Hockey, train to be the best.
I was at the Absolute Filth Hockey Wax website the other day, and I was wondering to myself what Absolute Filth's Dragon's Blood smells like. Is it fiery, or maybe it's sweet like the scent of victory after a triple overtime game? Probably a mystical aroma that'll magically make you dominate the ice. Knowing the folks at Absolute Filth, I bet it's part fierce dragon, part subtle smokiness, with a dash of awesomeness jammed into that giant puck of wax. Whatever it is, I'm definitely grabbing some Dragon's Blood for my next game. Gonna slap that wax on my stick and play with fire. Sorry boys, but the locker room's about to smell like a medieval fantasy tonight. Check out Dragon's Blood and more over at Absolute Filth's website, hockeywax.com. Perfect for the holidays, and they've even got a 2-for-1 sale going on right now with free shipping. Awaken your inner dragon and rule the ice at hockeywax.com.
Are you serious about playing your sport in college? Do you need a flexible education that allows you to maintain your practice and competition schedules while also preparing you to succeed at the next level? You should check out the University of Nebraska High School. UNHS is accredited and offers more than 100 online courses, including NCAA-approved courses to protect your academic eligibility. Students can earn a UNHS diploma or take a single course for transfer credit. Courses are college prep, self-paced, and available 24/7, 365. Enroll anytime and take up to a year to complete a course. Visit highschool.nebraska.edu today.
Hey, it's Bobby Moran, Director of Athletics at Thayer Academy. You know what? Experience matters, and Thayer Academy's professional coaching staff understands how to work with each student athlete to help them succeed. Our coaches and faculty are committed to ensuring both 5th to 12th graders feel known, connected, and prepared. This is Thayer's secret sauce, nurturing each student to reach their full potential. Here, success is truly a team sport. Are you ready for your child to take the next step? See what Thayer has to offer at thayer.org. That's THAYER.org.
Overtime.
Yes, welcome back to Overtime, where I give our panelists 3 random questions out of nowhere and see how they do. We are going to continue a tradition or pattern or something that we started in the last episode. I'm going to give you 3 controversial quotes from hockey figures and see how you fare in terms of just reacting to them. You can agree, disagree, or whatever. Just let us know what you think. First question. This comes from an anonymous coach quoted somewhere anonymously, so we know it must be accurate. But anyways, the quote says, "The refs always favor the big market teams. Small teams can't catch a break." Evan, what do you think about that?
Small teams can't catch a break. I think that can happen sometimes. I mean, it's interesting though, because like the Florida Panthers have been getting a lot of calls for the last 3 years. They're not a big market team, but they're good. I think back in the day, like Montreal never got the first penalty in Montreal. So like I think there was that. Now I think it's changed. So I don't see it as much. I also can't I sometimes complain about officiating, but I hate when I do and I hate when others do it. So I don't see it as much anymore, but definitely back in the day for sure.
Yeah, it's one of those things we all do, and we know we're probably in the wrong because it's just frustration from your team not doing well.
Yes.
Pat, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd agree with everything you guys just said. It's kind of like the rose-colored glasses, or you got your Bruins goggles on.
Yep.
Evan saying the Panthers get calls after they knocked the Bruins out 2 years in a row.
Exactly. Yes.
But like you look at the Panthers and what they did last year, and you look at every now and then I'll find myself on a 2011 Bruins rabbit hole and like watching old highlights, and you see a lot of plays that other fan bases got up in arms over, or you see the comment section. It's like Bruins got away with everything. It goes both ways, and at the end of the day, if you really dig into it, unless it's glaring, it's probably all pretty similar. But you got your team goggles on, so it's always going to feel lopsided.
Yeah. It's just fun to yell, "Come on, ref!" It's just fun to yell that. Yeah. Okay. Question number 2, or I should say, quote number 2 comes from Ken Hitchcock, and Ken Hitchcock said the following: "The regular season is pointless. The real game starts in the playoffs." Regular season is pointless. The real game starts in the playoffs. Oh, of course, talk about the NHL. Pat, your thoughts?
I think there's 2 sides to that, maybe even 3. The first side would be like, yeah, maybe in the NBA. The other side is, you look at the Bruins that prove that statement correct, where they did so well 2 years ago in the regular season and then just wilted in the playoffs.
Yes.
Then you look at Florida that year when they knocked the Bruins out, and they got on this crazy run from the trade deadline through the end of the season, and they rolled that into the playoffs. And you see that a lot every season. So I don't necessarily agree. I think especially if you're a lower seeded team and you're playing, and what we talked about throughout this podcast with some of the teams in the large and small school tournament, like when you're playing your best hockey down the stretch of the final like 2 months of the season and you get to roll into the playoffs like that means something.
Evan, your thoughts on that one?
It's funny, during the playoffs, I always think like, how do we do regular season hockey? It doesn't compare. Like any level, high school, squirts, NHL, like playoff hockey is so much better than regular season. But I agree with Pat on the fact that if you're a lower seeded team, if you're playing your best hockey at the end of the year, like you are coming in with a ton of momentum. So I would actually go with Ken Hitchcock is wrong. Regular season hockey matters. So yeah, that's where I stand on that.
But even that, because of the length of the season, you're allowed to underperform in the first half. And if you get just a little momentum, it sort of begs the question.
Bruins are doing that right now.
Yeah, right. So they're definitely going to win the
Might not just be the first half.
Yeah, it may not be the first half. It may be longer.
But that's just it. It begs the question, what's the point of the regular season? The point is actually not, I guess you could say, to see who assembles the best record, but no one wants to be the team that has the best record in hockey. Well, you just mentioned it was the Bruins, right? Had the best record of all time, right? And then lost in the first round. So on the other hand, you can't like not have the regular season, right? I mean, people have to go to hockey games. I wonder if someone has ever proposed some sort of super duper sort of more of a round robin system where, or almost like a prolonged playoffs instead of, cut the regular season down and then have a prolonged playoffs that is like, double elimination or something.
Well, isn't European soccer technically like the winner is the person who wins the regular, like the champ is the person who wins the regular
the
season?
first place in the standings. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah. If that was the case in the NHL, the Bruins would have like 100.
Hang the banner, throw the parade.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I would also add to the point I made about the Bruins where like it kind of doesn't matter because they fell out in the playoffs. It like if you kind of remember those like last 3 weeks of the regular season, they were kind of winning some games they shouldn't have been winning, and it's like kind of playing out the string just to get the record. Bergeron's getting hurt. Is he hurt? What did it happen in a game?
Yep.
What have you? That affected that team a lot.
Mhm.
So
Oh,
I think
yeah.
it matters. It definitely matters. Or
Yeah.
if you want to add some spice, in-season tournament. It's happening right now in the NBA.
That's right.
Yeah, but does anybody
right.
care?
I guess I agree with Yaz on this.
Yeah.
I can't get myself up for the NBA Cup.
I
Yeah.
kind of like.
I thought
like-
last year was cool, especially like when it was funny when Joe Mazzulla was running it up for the point differential. But yeah, this year it's like, oh, it's happening. Oh wow, I didn't even know.
Yeah, I like that they tried something, but at the end of the day, I don't think it'll stand the test of time. It's too weird to celebrate. Like my whole thing is how cheerfully do you celebrate that title? Because the season's still going on. It's like, hey, we won this little thing over here.
Yeah, it's like we all clown the
Lakers?
Lakers for hanging the banner.
Right.
Yeah, it was like I think it's more for kids. I think for us, we grew up with that not happening. That the playoffs are all that matters. I think for kids though, like if you're 6 or 7 and your team wins the NBA Cup, it's like, oh my god. And I think then maybe it means something to them. And then 10, 20 years down the line, you have more and more people into in-season tournaments. It's not
Yeah.
for us.
It's
Maybe I'm
kind
wrong.
of like All-Star games where like we get all up in arms. Oh, the All-Star game stinks. It's not for us.
No,
not
it
for
isn't.
us.
When we were kids, we loved it. I loved watching the All-Star game as a kid. I hate it now.
Yeah, right. My son, as a young man, once said to me, "Dad, I have 7 championships." I'm like, "What? How do you have 7 championships?" He was counting all the AAU basketball tournaments that his team won, because in AAU basketball, at least over where he played, there are no records. They don't keep track of records. You just go from one tournament to the next. So maybe that's why maybe he likes the in-season tournament. I think it's weird. Anyway, all right, let's move on to the final quote. Comes to us from Brian Burke, and the quote is as follows: "Analytics are ruining hockey. The game is about instincts, not spreadsheets." Evan, your turn on this one.
Said like a true old school eye test hockey guy.
Old-time hockey.
Yeah, that is old-time hockey. I think it's a balance. I think, the old guard gets very antsy, doesn't like analytics. I think analytics are very important to the game. I think you get to learn more about the game. Teams are more informed when they're signing guys, trading for guys, hidden value. I think when you go too far on that, if you put a whole team together based off expected goals, it's like, well, that's it doesn't exactly mean they're going to score. So you need a balance, but there's definitely a place for analytics in hockey. And I don't think it's ruined the game. The game in the last 10 years has gotten 100 times more fast and 100 times more skilled. It's not like baseball where, you do see like a real tangible difference. Hockey's gotten way better. So
you see it in baseball. You definitely see it in football. Teams are making decisions they hadn't made in the past. A lot of going for it on fourth down. A lot of 2-point conversions, which drives me straight up the wall. Don't take it to. Don't go for 2 unless you need it in the fourth quarter, because you don't know what's going to happen. But anyway, and I'm going to get to you, Pat. But I'm not even aware of the criticism of how has analytics changed hockey? What do you see different strategies in switching lines or whatnot, something like that? Or Pat, why don't you take that one since Evan's been talking too much?
Okay.
it's true.
No, it's not.
I mean, it might be like, I think lines and, if you think about, when we're pulling the goalie, like it feels like goalies get pulled a lot earlier now. Because like I'm so used to it in the NHL where like goalies out of the net 2 or 3 minutes left, where maybe 10 years ago was a minute. And high school, I mentioned this to you a lot, Evan, like high school and like even prep sometimes goalie's not out of the net till like maybe 30 seconds. And it makes me so antsy. And especially if it's a close game, I'm like, how is he still in the net? How have you not taken him out yet? So I bet there's a little bit of that. I think the in-game stuff is probably more like video as opposed to analytics. But and like Evan said, for as far as like the overall point, if you're using it to base your entire decision, it's going to ruin things. Like you get in a team, like you use expected goals. You have an entire top 12 of forwards on expected goals. And it's like, well, those aren't actual goals. Those are expected. They didn't actually happen. So if you have someone with high expected goals, high rate, how real life goals, that's pretty good. So I think if you use it, and we see this in the NFL and MLB, like we talked about, if you're using it to inform your decisions and supplant your decisions and, be a very valuable tool for you as a front office, it's great. But if you're kind of Boston Red Sox and using analytics in every single roster move you make, it feels like then it's not great, as we've seen.
Yeah, and it also there is, I think, something to the quote that it can't trump instincts or like no matter, because the analytics they give you something, but it doesn't take into account everything. It doesn't take into account things like momentum, crowd noise. Just if something happened earlier in the game that is going to, it's like, I saw what they did here on defense, so now I know we're going to do this. So yeah, you got to play with your head as well. Anything else on that, Evan?
Yeah, I was going to add, I think when it comes to draft picks, like in the NHL especially, there aren't, not to my knowledge, unless teams have them and they haven't really disclosed them, there aren't crazy deep analytics that I've seen on guys coming from Canadian juniors or the NCAA. Sometimes there are some team advanced stats in college hockey, but not like player by player. So that is where instincts come in. I think that's why you see a lot of draft picks miss, because it's pretty much all instinct. It's all, I'm getting a gut feeling this is the guy, we should go with him instead of him. And I think that's why that happens. And same with, by the way, recruiting. There's no advanced stats for prep or high school or U18 or U16 hockey. So yeah, it's all like, what do you see? And that's why there are misses, because there aren't those analytics. I think if you put analytics in the equation and it's like, Vanessa Hall, her expected goals is this, and her Corsi 4 percentage is this, it's like, oh, slam dunk. Whereas it can be tougher without those things. So I think analytics would actually help a lot of people if they came into play. We're not going to be the ones, I don't think, that start the Pat, I don't think we're going to be doing any Corsi 4 this year.
No, I mean, I did my best to track saves, and especially in the tournament games last year. And when I did baseball in the spring, before I mercifully found the scoring app that the MIAA teams use, I was tracking pitch counts myself.
Yeah, hard enough.
Yeah, not fun. So I don't think we'll be doing that.
No, we will not.
I thought it was a bridge too far when certain NHL teams started using analytics to determine who they were going to hire to ride the Zamboni. That was a bit much for me. I think, just go with your gut.
Is water per cubic foot of ice?
All of that. I thought it was a bit much. Terrific job on overtime, both of y'all. And we send it back to Evan to wrap things up.
All right. Well, yes, thank you for that. And we have a lot of girls prep stuff coming in the next couple weeks, next couple months. It's going to be a really fun season. And yeah, that's been RinkWise. That's Pat Donnelly. I'm Evan Marinofsky. We will see you at the rinks.